Hello, today we are covering 2.4 deductive reasoning. You guys will be able to understand and use the law of syllogism as well as the law of detachment. So if you notice here, there's actually 3 correct solutions on this one. Identify the hypothesis and conclusion. So the hypothesis is always what follows the if statement, and the conclusion is what follows the then statement. Notice A, B, and D are all the same thing, so these are all actually correct solutions. I need to fix that. Our 5-minute check here, we cannot do since we skipped 2.2, but we will move on, okay? So our new vocab is deductive reasoning, valid, law of detachment, and law of syllogism. So the law of detachment, this is the process that detectives use to identify who is most likely responsible for a crime, is called deductive reasoning. Unlike inductive reasoning, that's another vocab term here that we should know. Unlike inductive reasoning, which uses a pattern of examples or observations to make a conjecture, deductive reasoning uses facts, rules, definitions, or properties to reach logical conclusions from given statements. So on the next few, we're going to decide inductive or deductive. Inductive is a pattern or observation, and deductive is facts, rules, definitions, or properties. So on this one, determine whether the conclusion is based on inductive or deductive reasoning. It says, in Miguel's town, the month of April has had the most rain for the past 5 years. He thinks that April will have the most rain this year. Now, because it is him thinking and he's basing it on a pattern of the past 5 years, this would be inductive reasoning. There is no scientific fact or law or rule or definition that tells us that it would be deductive. It's just his observations. Similarly, another weather question. Sandra learned that if it is cloudy at night, it will not be as cold in the morning than if there are no clouds at night. Sandra knows it'll be cloudy tonight, so she believes it will not be cold tomorrow morning. Now there are 2 words here that I want to point out. Learned and knows. Now this one could almost go either way, but these 2 words signal to me that this is deductive reasoning. This tells me that there's some rule or whatever are the other words, some rule, fact, or definition or property that she learned and knows this to be true. We also have another one. Macy's mother orders pizza for dinner every Thursday. Today is Thursday. Macy concludes that she will have pizza for dinner tonight. Now this is just based on a pattern or an observation, so this would be inductive reasoning for this one. Okay, so that's inductive and deductive. So, while one counterexample is enough to disprove a conjecture reached using inductive reasoning, it is not logically correct or valid method to proving a conjecture. To prove a conjecture requires deductive reasoning. One valid form of deductive reasoning is the law of detachment, and we'll learn another one in just a minute. So the law of detachment in words says, if P then Q is a true statement, and P is true, then Q is true. So for example, it says, if a car is out of gas, then it will not start. These are very general statements. If any car is out of gas, then it will not start. Then we get more focused. It says Sarah's car is out of gas. So our valid conclusion that we could make based on the given here is Sarah's car will not start. Similarly, for a geometry example, if a triangle has 3 congruent sides, then it is an equilateral. That's just a very general statement. So we have Darren drew a triangle with all sides 10 centimeters long. Then we can conclude, valid conclusion would be Darren's triangle is an equilateral. So when we focus our statement, it should be similar to our hypothesis. And then our conclusion should be similar to the given's conclusion. All right, so determine whether the conclusion is valid based on the given information. If not, write invalid and explain your reasoning. So the given is, if a figure is a square, then it is a parallelogram. So narrower, the figure is a parallelogram. Our conclusion is the figure is a square. Is this valid or invalid? Now notice, this narrower statement here is not similar to our hypothesis, which means this is a telltale sign that this is an invalid conclusion. And a reason that we could say here, if we're really thinking about it, is that not all parallelograms are squares. They could be other shapes as well. Okay? So that is not a valid conclusion. This next one, once again, these they tell us is already true. Our given is true. Then determine whether the conclusion is valid based on the given information. So, if a polygon is a convex quadrilateral, once again, very broad, general, then the sum of the interior angles is 360 degrees. So, narrower, ABCD is a convex quadrilateral. That does relate to our hypothesis. Our conclusion, the sum of the interior angles of ABCD is 360. And that relates to our conclusion of our given. So I would say that this is valid. And then my reason here, it doesn't say we need a reason, but I could go ahead and say that the conclusion, the conclusion flows from the given information. All right. Hopefully you're still doing good. We have one more type of law. This is the law of syllogism. It's another type of deductive reasoning. This law allows you to draw conclusions from two conditional statements when they're both true. And this is also when the conclusion of one statement is the hypothesis of the other. Now this is the main point here for the law of syllogism. The conclusion of one statement has to be the hypothesis of the other. So, for example, we are given, if you get a job, then you will earn money. Notice the conclusion of that statement is the same as the hypothesis of the other one. If you earn money, then you will buy a car. So our valid conclusion then is just getting rid of that middle step and saying, if you get a job, then you will buy a car. So, to determine which statement flows logically from the given statements, first of all, we have, if Jamal finishes his homework, he will go out with his friends. Secondly, if Jamal goes out with his friends, he will go to the movies. So, we need to check, does our first conclusion match up with our first hypothesis? Indeed it does, which means we can use the law of syllogism and say that if Jamal finishes his homework, he will go to the movies. That would be the law of syllogism. Let's look at the next one, our last one for these slides. So what statement, if any, flows logically from this? If your alarm clock goes off in the morning, then you will get out of bed. If you ride a bus, then you will go to work. First thing we need to check, do our conclusion and our hypothesis of the next match up? In this case, they don't. So, we don't even need to look at any of A, B, and C. Our solution is D. There is no valid conclusion using the law of syllogism. And that's it. All right, have a good afternoon.